The big shocker, the big headline in our poll, Scott Walker at 16% ahead of everybody else. Whether Mitt Romney's in the field or out of the field, he's in the lead with incredibly strong favorable, unfavorable ratings in Iowa. 60% favorable, only 12% unfavorable. Tell us about what explains this. He's come from nowhere to the front of the pack.
Well, you know, John, I was at a lunch on Saturday with a bunch of really, huge heavy hitters in money and politics and some pretty sharp political minds. They were talking the Republican field. No one mentioned Scott Walker. This poll was a shock, I think, to a lot of people. I think Scott Walker, he's a neighbor to begin with. He's a guy who can play in both the faith community, the movement conservatives, and the business, more mainstream community. He had when Mark was out there, he made a terrific impression at that conservative forum. Look, this guy has proven that he's a player. This is not a flash in the pan. And to use a baseball analogy, John, he can hit in Principal Park, the home of the Iowa Cubs. Now we'll see if he can hit big league pitching. He's a little bit shaky with Martha Raddatz on Sunday, but I think Scott Walker is really in that top tier now for real.
Al, we're all talking now about his strengths as an Iowa candidate, and I know there's questions about being a national candidate in terms of fundraising and foreign policy and some of the issues you said he came up on this week with Martha Raddatz yesterday. What are his weaknesses just as an Iowa candidate as you see it?
Well, his weaknesses as an Iowa candidate would be sort of the opposite of his strengths. If he gets caught in that vice, is he really part of that movement conservatives, or is he really an establishment conservative? Right now, he draws from both sides, and that's a delicate line to walk. I think if he's artful, he'll be able to do that. Secondly, when you put him in a debate stage, he's not the most charismatic man that ever lived. I don't know that really is determinative, but if I were a Walker aide now, that would worry me a little bit. And you got to make sure he can handle some of those issues you just alluded to. I actually think he's probably going to be a better fundraiser than people think. They draw analogies to Tim Pawlenty, but what Walker's been through with those recalls was he's had to raise lots of money.
Yeah, including with a lot of grassroots email lists that he can mail to people on. So another big name in the poll who is getting a lot of attention because he did not do so well is Jeb Bush. He's split on favorable, unfavorable, favorable 46, unfavorable 43. And then we asked people how much would they be impacted by Jeb Bush's position on immigration and Common Core. 30% said it would be a deal killer for them. 33% said they'd have to consider it. 32, no real problem. Jeb Bush obviously has not put in effort in Iowa yet. Despite these numbers, do you see him as having potential to be in the top 3 by the end of this in Iowa, or no?
Well, I think it's a real challenge for him, Mark. I think there has to be an internal debate in the next 4 or 5 months in the Bush campaign is, do they really want to compete in Iowa? Because I think these numbers show it's very hard. Now, if Mike Murphy were here, he would spin us. I know that's a shock to most of us if Mike Murphy would spin. But, he would say, look, they're just that's his brother. They don't know Jeb. He hadn't been introduced to him, all of which may be true. But it also may be the brand name. That 46-43 favorable, that's among Republicans. That's terrible. That's just awful. Most of the others were in the 60s. Hillary Clinton was 84% among Democrats. Among your own party, you want to be at least in the 60s. So he's got huge negatives to overcome.
Yeah, we should emphasize all these numbers. Just you said it, but just to put the exclamation point on it, all these numbers are amongst likely Republican caucus attendees, which, as you said, if his numbers are that bad with them, that's a problem.
Al, let me ask you, let me just stay with Bush for 1 second before I move on to Chris Christie. On this particular point, back in October when we polled Iowa Republicans, we had him at a 28% unfavorable. He's now up to 43% unfavorable. It would seem that as people have got to know him better in Iowa, they like him less. What explains that?
John, I can't explain that. I really don't think they've gotten to know him better because he hadn't been there. I just think the Bush brand name among a lot of conservative and Republican activists just is not very good now. I mean, there are people who fondly remember the father, but that was 25 years ago. And I don't think the W really has a very good reputation right now among a lot of Republicans. That has to be what's hurting Jeb because they haven't been exposed to him, really, John.
Now let me ask you about Chris Christie on the same question, favorable, unfavorable. Back in October, he was not very popular in Iowa, 39% favorable, 45% unfavorable. Now, the favorable has dropped by 3 points. He's only at 36. The unfavorable has risen 9 points. He's up to 54. 36 favorable, 54 unfavorable. I don't understand how that makes for a viable candidacy in the state of Iowa or anywhere else that those numbers hold.
Well, that's the good news for Jeb Bush. Maybe it'll dissuade Chris Christie from going out there. The only good news for Chris Christie is there's only one person who's more unpopular among Republicans and the rank and file than Chris Christie, and that's Donald Trump. I don't see how Chris Christie competes in Iowa. I just don't. I could imagine, to go to Mark's original question, I could imagine Jeb Bush going out there. He's a very effective campaigner. He's smart and turning it around. I just can't see Chris Christie doing that. That's always a dangerous limb to go out on, but I'd be interested in what you guys think.
Well, you know, I'll make the argument for Christie in Iowa. He's got a very good relationship with Terry Branstad, the governor. He's hired a couple strategists who worked for Branstad. And if he times it right, he can exceed expectations there. And as we all know, Bill Clinton didn't win the New Hampshire primary in 1992. If you exceed expectations, you can get a lot done on the ground there. I think he's still a great retail candidate, and I still think when we get on the debate stage, he may be the star.
My prediction is Ted Cruz will be the star on the debate stage if he gets in. And Mark, you're right about that. But I think in order, you don't have to win, but you have to win, place, or show. And boy, that's going to be tough.
Well,
for,
but if
just
Chris to go back to Bush now, you're right. Bush has a choice to make. I predict he will compete in Iowa, not just because he hired Dave Kochel, the top Iowa strategist. But let's say he either doesn't compete there or fares really poorly. You've got 25 to 40% of the vote is an establishment vote. If Walker decides to play in the anti-establishment lane, which right now I think is a relatively safe bet, then where does that vote go? Somebody's got to get it.
Well, that's right. No, but you're right. But Jeb Bush would have to stay out for Chris Christie, I think, to have any shot at finishing third.
Yep.
Yes.
Or collapse. Yep. All right. Last person we want to talk about is Huckabee. We talked about him in the first block. His fave-unfave is spectacular. I was surprised that his horse race number isn't better, given that he won the caucuses 8 years ago. Why would you say at this point, obviously some speculation involved, why would Huckabee be so well liked and doing well on a lot of issues compared to some of the other conservatives, but not do better in the horse race?
He's in third place.
Yeah, some of it is competition, I think. But interestingly, when you take the second choice of Romney voters, because the poll was taken before Romney dropped out, interestingly, the person that gains the most is Mike Huckabee. I never would have guessed that.
Yep.
He goes up to 13, and he's competitive. I think that of the two guys who won the last couple Iowa caucuses, Santorum and Huckabee, I think Santorum is going to have a very difficult time gaining traction. But Huckabee still resonates out there. And I wouldn't be surprised if this poll, if anything, slightly understates his standing there. He's very popular with the faith community. Money won't be a huge factor there. I think Iowa's the perfect state for Mike Huckabee, and if he doesn't win in Iowa, I don't see where else he can win.
Al, do you think either Ted Cruz or Rick Perry has a chance to take Huckabee out of the lead position among Iowa evangelicals?
I don't think Perry has too many problems. I just can't see that, John. I think Cruz could be underrated here. Cruz is going to be a heck of a performer if he gets in. Not sure he's going to get in. If he gets in, he's no one can command the stage better than Ted Cruz. They hate him in Washington. That's a tremendous credential in Iowa. I think he would have a shot at doing that.
We should tell people full details on the poll are on our website, BloombergPolitics.com. I want to just ask you quickly, anything in the Democratic results that interest you?
Well, it's sort of the rising tide. Hillary's doing every bit as well as people expected, but Joe Biden's favorable has climbed. I don't know, Mark, what 10, 15 points since October. And the only explanation I have is it is a rising tide. People are feeling better about Democrats.
And the president's numbers have gone up, so maybe Biden gets the halo of that.
All right.
A little bit, yeah.